so this is a review from what we did yesterday. There's autotrophs and there's heterotrophs. Autotrophs are important because they're the only organisms that can capture energy from the environment and make it usable for us. In this class, we almost exclusively talk about photoautotrophs. Photo means light. They use sunlight. But I just want to make you aware that there is another group called chemoautotrophs that can harness chemical energy from the deep sea vents. Why would you need an alternate way to harness energy at the bottom of the ocean? There's no sunlight. Okay, so at the bottom of the ocean at the deep sea vents, it is chemical energy rather than sunlight that's being used. But in here, we're talking about sunlight. Okay? The other thing I want to point out to you is you will hear me say plants, plants, plants when I'm talking about photosynthesis. And that's not completely intentional because there are many organisms that can do photosynthesis, including algae, which are one of the most important groups of producers where? In the ocean, yeah. Heterotrophs, we harvest our energy by eating other organisms. We talked about that yesterday. But again, for the rest of this week, our focus is photosynthesis, okay? The prefix photo means light. Do you guys know what synthesis means? To make, okay? But we are not making light. We are making carbohydrates using the energy from light. So photosynthesis traps free energy in light and uses it to produce carbohydrates from carbon dioxide. So a lot of times we're just like, plants, they make their own energy with photosynthesis. But to be specific, they make their own carbohydrates. So they need an energy source, which is what? The sunlight. But they also need a carbon source. What is the carbon source? Yeah, carbon dioxide in the air. So today we're going to talk more about energy source versus carbon source. This is our overall equation. What do you notice is different about it? It's got sixes because it's balanced. Yesterday I didn't balance it just to keep it simple. But remember, matter cannot be created or destroyed. So if I have 12 hydrogen coming out in my equation, then I need 12 hydrogen coming in. So that's why it's balanced, because you can't create and destroy matter. The same number of carbons going into the equation should be coming out of the equation. But they've been rearranged into a new molecule, right? The carbon here comes in as a molecule of CO2. And when the reaction is complete, that carbon becomes a molecule of what? Glucose. Okay, so when reactions happen, molecules are rearranged into new molecules. So the carbon from CO2 becomes the carbon in glucose. All right, photosynthesis occurs in the organelle chloroplast. I did spell it right today. Okay, because chloroplasts contain what pigment? Chlorophyll. Okay, and if you look, this is an Elodea plant. It's a water plant. Miss Rich actually has it in her fish tank, so I'll try to make sure we can look at it one day. But you can actually see the chloroplast in this plant because it's so thin. The leaves are so thin that you can look at individual cells like this. So every little circle is a chloroplast. Now the nucleus is in there too. Why can I see the chloroplast and not the nucleus? Because it's transparent and the chloroplast is green from the chlorophyll pigment. So it's a really easy organelle to see under the microscope, which is kind of cool. Okay, now inside the chloroplast, you have this on your reading guide, are stacks called thylakoids. So inside the chloroplast, there's stacks of, ooh, that's not a good color for right there. Hang on. There's stacks of thylakoids. So one single is a thylakoid. I'm looking at just one. Just one of them is a thylakoid. And a whole sac, or a whole stack, is a granum. Plural of that is grana. Okay, and then the fluid, I didn't quite get it erased from the last class. The fluid is stroma. And we won't focus on that a lot, but what I want you to realize is the chloroplast is specialized. It's got different structures. The thylakoids are for the light-dependent reactions, and the stroma is where the carbohydrates are actually made, where the Calvin cycle happens. That'll mean more in just a minute. Okay, so chlorophyll is a pigment that's embedded in the thylakoid membrane. It's almost like a little satellite. Okay, it has to be anchored down, for lack of a better word, so it's in the membrane of these thylakoids, and that is where it is capturing blue and red light. So you have this question on your reading guide: why are plants green? It reflects the green light. It reflects green and it absorbs blue and red. So what would happen to a plant that I put under green light for an extended period of time? It would die because it can't absorb that pigment. What light can be absorbed? Light that's absorbed is light that can be used. Okay, if you can't absorb that light, you can't use that light. So looking at your absorption spectrum, if I wanted my plants, if I was growing tomato plants and I wanted to get maximum growth, what color should I grow them under? Blue, because that's where my absorbance is the highest. And notice most plants have two types of chlorophyll, chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. Can plants be other colors besides green? Yes, and those are called accessory pigments. Okay, and a lot of times they have other purposes beyond photosynthesis. So plants do come in different colors, and it's cool. Okay, now that gets us to the two parts of photosynthesis: the light reactions and the light independent reactions. Out of those two, which one doesn't need light? The one that is independent of light. So, okay, and this is a summary picture that we're going to walk through. What I need you to understand is that it takes energy to make energy. It takes energy to make carbohydrates. Okay, what is the energy for photosynthesis? The sunlight. Well, the cells can't directly use that sunlight. We talked about that a little bit yesterday about how, like, converting currency. Light is energy, but it can't be used as raw light. The cell can't do that. The light has to be converted into energy carriers. So it's kind of like stuff like this is really popular now. Do you guys have anything that is powered by a solar battery? Okay, like I have a camping lantern. I have a couple camping lanterns that are solar. Okay, so I set them out in the sun during the day. It stores the energy, and then that energy in the lantern is used for what? To turn the light on, right? But it could really be for anything. With the solar battery, I charge the battery from the sun, and then I use that battery for whatever I'm doing, be it charging my phone or turning on a light or whatever, right? So photosynthesis works the same way. The light from sunlight is stored as energy carriers. It's stored as a battery almost. And then that energy is what's used to make carbohydrates. So the purpose of photosynthesis is to make carbohydrates. But before I can do that, I've got to have the energy to make the carbs. And that's what the first part of photosynthesis is. So by the time we're done, we'll explain this whole picture. Right now, you know there's two steps: light and light independent. Okay, if I wanted to break that up further, there's really three stages. I've got to capture the energy from the sunlight, and then I've got to use that energy to make energy carriers. You can think of those energy carriers like batteries, okay? So these first two steps happen in the light reaction, okay? The light reactions, I'm getting ready, okay? I'm building up the energy that I need. And then the light independent, or you might hear me call it the Calvin cycle, that's like the grand finale, where I'm actually doing the purpose of photosynthesis, which is to make what? Glucose. So step one, charge up the batteries. Step two, use those batteries to make carbohydrates. So I use ATP and NADPH, which we'll talk about in a minute, to make glucose from CO2. And this is what happens in all of this. I don't have room to write to the side. All of that happens in the light independent. I'm still out of space, okay? Light independent. Okay, it looks like this. Okay, and whoa, that's a lot, right? I'm going to try to simplify this for you. At the end of the day, if you don't get everything that I'm saying right now, that's okay for right now, but I want to at least introduce you to it. This is a thylakoid. So this is one single stack. Okay, this is the middle of it. It's called the lumen, and then embedded in it, I have proteins called photosystems. Okay, and they're going to help me, or help the plant, capture sunlight and store the sunlight energy in energy carriers. My energy carriers are ATP and NADPH. You can think of them as batteries. To kind of understand how this works, you've got to think about a molecule. And what part of the molecule forms the bonds? Protons, neutrons, or electrons? Electrons form the bonds. And sharing electrons, okay, is like sharing energy. When a bond is broken, electrons are released, okay? And electrons you can think of like energy for right now. So you're thinking of energy like electrons, okay? And those electrons are stored in bonds. So if I form a bond, I'm storing energy. And if I break a bond, what am I doing? Releasing it, using it, okay? So forming a bond stores energy and electrons. Breaking a bond releases energy and electrons. So what happens is, I'm going to start you over here. Okay, sunlight hits the photosystem. This is chlorophyll. These up here are chlorophyll. They're absorbed by the chlorophyll. There's a little electron in the bottom of this photosystem. It's struck by sunlight and it becomes excited. Okay, once it's excited, what does it do? It moves. It's traveling, okay, until it gets to the second photosystem. Okay, and that electron is going to be used to make 2 NADPH. Okay, well, how did I get NADPH? That's just an energy carrying molecule. I had a molecule called NADP plus, and I had a hydrogen. So to form NADPH, what did I do? I added a hydrogen, I bonded them together, right? And when I made a bond, I stored what? Energy. And that energy came from the excited electron. Okay, so that's one thing that's happening. Well, you know how I told you there was an electron here to become excited and travel and all that? When that electron is gone, it has to be replaced. And where did I tell you electrons come from? Where are they stored? Bonds. So how can I get an electron? By breaking a bond. I'm breaking the bond of water. Okay, and when I break water, look at the two things. What are the two things that I get? I get oxygen and I get hydrogen. So this is where your oxygen comes from. Your oxygen comes from splitting water. Why did I split water? Because I needed an electron. Okay, so that's, and I'm simplifying a little bit, but that's one thing that's happened. Okay, an electron has become excited. It's excited because it has energy from the sun. Okay, and that high energy electron is now stored in NADPH, which is like a charged battery. It's an energy carrier. Why is it charged? Because I formed a bond and stored an electron. Okay, look, the other thing that is being made is, look down here at the bottom, ATP. So ATP you already know is energy. ATP is my other energy carrier. The way it's formed is a little bit different. It's from a process called chemiosmosis that is a little bit difficult to understand. Okay, when I split water, I got oxygen, but I also got what? Hydrogen. Well, the other thing that's happening that's a little bit hard to see in this picture is, what's the charge of electrons? They're negative, which means they're going to attract what? Positive. So as these electrons are traveling, they are pulling hydrogen into the inside. Okay, because that hydrogen is attracted to the negative electrons. So hydrogen is being pulled in. Now look at my picture. Where do I have more hydrogen? On the inside or on the outside? Definitely on the inside, right? So what happens is, as the electrons move, some of them are being stored in NADPH. Okay, and I'm building up a hydrogen gradient. Okay, look, if I have more on the inside than on the outside, it's going to move out, right, from high to low. And it's going to move through ATP synthase, which is a transport protein, and it's an enzyme. What happens is, when hydrogen's moving through that, it moves so fast that it makes this molecule spin, and it's the energy from the spinning smashes ADP and phosphate together. So I make ATP. Okay, something called chemiosmosis. It's kind of like, it reminds me of like have you guys ever seen a water wheel and how the movement of water turns the wheel? Well, the movement of hydrogen turns this enzyme. This part of the enzyme actually turns. And that turning provides kinetic energy to make ATP. Right now, that's a lot. And we're not ready to know all of that right now. But what I need you to know is what energy source came in. What energy source did I use? Back up. Light. Okay? And with that energy from light, the light excited an electron, right? And where are those electrons stored now? In NADPH. So that's one of my energy carriers. My other energy carrier is ATP. If you don't understand the how right now, that's fine for right now, okay, until you get in more advanced classes. What I need you to know is the light energy from the sun is now stored in what? ATP and NADPH. That's what you need to know right now, okay? And in the process, I split water. Why did I split water? Because I needed to harvest an electron, right? I needed to harvest an electron to keep the process going. And you can keep it as simple as that right now. And that's my summary. What two things go in? Light and water. Okay, and what is the purpose of light? It's your energy source. Okay, and then over here, these things come out. NADPH, ATP, and oxygen. Oxygen is my waste product. What is the purpose of NADPH and ATP? Okay, these now store energy. These are energy stores or energy carriers. Right, so I have charged my batteries, but I have not completed the purpose of photosynthesis yet. What is the purpose of photosynthesis? To make glucose. All right, well, I couldn't make glucose right off the bat because I didn't have energy. Now I have my energy and I'm ready to make glucose. That's what's going to be next. Before we move on, look down here. This is what we call a summary reaction. It is all your steps in one reaction. In the reactants, only one reactant is used in each stage. What reactant did we just use in the light reaction? We used H2O, and by using H2O, when we split it, it became what? But it's going to form oxygen, right? And what is a little bit confusing is it looks like we've lost hydrogen. Okay, right now I just want you to focus on the fact that when I split water, I get oxygen. That's in the light reactions. I have used no carbon yet. Is carbon part of the light reactions? No. Okay, so now this is my energy part. Remember I told you we're going to focus on the energy source and the carbon source. This is my energy source. Okay, the light, sunlight, okay, is being used to make energy carriers. And in the process, I make oxygen. Oh, reaction, sorry. RXN is reactions. Okay, so that means the second part is going to be light independent. Reason I know these two things go together, the way you can remember, the carbon in carbon dioxide is going to be rearranged and it's going to become the carbon of what? Glucose. All right, so that's the next step. All right, same thing, we're going to do like a summary. The light independent reactions occur in the stroma, okay? So energy carriers are made in the thylakoids and then the actual reaction is carried out in the stroma. We are almost done. We're almost there. Okay, so in this step, the energy carriers, ATP and NADPH, that were produced in the light reactions are now going to be used to synthesize carbohydrates. So I don't actually make glucose until the light independent stage. What is my whole purpose of the light reactions? Why do we have to do that? What were we making? Energy carriers. Because we had to harness and store energy from where? The sun. There you go. So now I've got my energy. So obviously my energy is going to have to go in. So that's going to be ATP and NADPH. And if you want to make a note that that's energy, I think that's a good idea. This is my energy source. That says energy source. I'm sorry, my letters ran together. Energy source. Okay, but I also need a carbon source. What is my carbon source? Carbon dioxide. All right, now let's come over here to what comes out, and then we're going to point out what's a little bit funky about this in just a second. Okay, so the whole purpose is to make what? Glucose. So that's going to be my C6H12O6. All right, but something happens with my energy carriers. They don't just disappear. Okay, the electrons from ATP and NADPH actually go into glucose. But I have to harvest those electrons. I have to release the energy. How do I release energy? Breaking bonds. So when I break these bonds, okay, when NADPH is broken, I end up with NADP plus and a hydrogen. And when I break ATP, ATP stands for triphosphate. So it's got 3 phosphates. So when I break one phosphate off, that makes it ADP, adenosine diphosphate. And then I have an extra phosphate hanging out. Oh, I forgot my D, NADPH. I knew that looked weird and I couldn't figure it out. NADPH. Okay, now here's what's weird about this. Is this written in the overall equation that I had you memorize? No, and that's what makes this so hard, is because it's not included in that summary reaction. Let's talk about why it's not included in that summary reaction. Can I flip back? Almost done. We're to the summary. It's an easy summary. Okay, come all the way back here. And we're going to see this picture again, but let's look right here. Okay. This ATP and NADPH, my energy carriers, where did it come from? Light reactions. It's charged in the light reactions. When it's charged, it goes to what? The Calvin cycle, where it's used to make glucose. Okay, so when it's used to make glucose, it's zapped, it's drained, the energy's gone. So my dead batteries go back to where? These are my dead batteries. They go back to light reactions. And what happens to them in the light reactions? They're recharged, where they go back to the Calvin cycle, and they're used again. And then when they're used again, what happens to them? They go back to light reactions. It's a cycle that never leaves the chloroplast. And that's why they're not included in that big reaction, because they don't leave the reaction. They're being used over and over again. And so it's hard, because that is the purpose of the light reactions. The purpose of the light reactions is those energy carriers, but they're not in your equation. This year, we're going to skip these 2 parts. I really don't talk about that till AP. So you can write skip, or draw an X over it, because it's deeper than what we're doing because you hadn't had chemistry. Last thing, this is another picture that if you can do this picture and kind of commit this picture to memory, you can answer almost anything I throw at you about photosynthesis. Look at this picture. I've got my light reaction in the thylakoids. The rectangle is the energy source that goes in. What is the energy source? Light. Okay, it's called the light reaction, so of course it requires light. Okay, what is the other part? And you can look at, see how I was doing this with my other class? You can look at your formula to help reason yourself through. I have water and I have CO2, so I just have to pick one. Which goes in? Water goes in. Okay? And then when I split water, what comes out? What's the waste product? Not yet. That's not a waste product. That's the purpose. Oxygen. Now, why can it not be glucose? Did any carbon go in? No. So can I get carbon out if I don't put carbon in? No. So that's how you know. If you can just get the water part in, okay, the purpose of splitting water is to harvest an electron. But if that's too much, just look. I can't make CO2 from water. There's no carbon. But I can make oxygen from water. Okay, so that's what comes in and out completely. My 2 energy carriers are my next blank. What are my energy carriers? Okay, ATP and NADPH. All right, so they're going to power the Calvin cycle, which is also called the light independent cycle. You got to remember that too. That's hard. Or it's just one more thing. Why do you think it's called the Calvin cycle? Yeah, he's the guy who invented it. But it actually works out because Calvin cycle starts with a C, right? And what goes into the Calvin cycle? Yeah, CO2, carbon dioxide goes in, and the carbon in CO2 is converted into what? The carbon in glucose. So that is everything you need to know about photosynthesis. It's a lot. But if you think about the purpose, it will help you with everything else. What is the purpose of photosynthesis overall? To make glucose. But I can't make glucose without energy. Okay, so where is energy made? Light reactions or light independent? Light, because light is the energy for photosynthesis. That light energy has to be stored in a usable form as energy carriers. What is my usable form? ATP and NADPH. Okay, in the Calvin cycle, I'm making carbohydrates. So glucose comes out. What is my carbon source that goes in? Carbon dioxide. Okay, now, I know this is hard to do. It's tempting because you're on your Chromebooks, but I want you to scroll to this picture and try to reason your way through this, fill it out without looking back. Now, if you don't know something, then fill it in the best you can. Like if you don't know that ATP is energy, then just write energy. Okay, try to get the big picture, and I'm going to come around and see how you're doing with that and help you out if you need a hint. All right, guys at home, try to fill this chart out for yourself. And if you have any questions, feel free to send me a message. Do those practice problems, the photosynthesis practice problems on the front page of Schoology. Submit them and shoot me a message, and I'll see how you're doing. Thanks.